It's wintry right now. The guy wants to make sure he's bundled up. And you know what? He tried to wake up Howard Collado. Howard Collado does not care about the green room. That's why he was sleeping on the job. David Holliday's right there. And if he did anything to you, Howard Collado, if your accusations are actually true, I would give this man not only a nice, steady, firm handshake, I would pay him money and say thank you so much for doing what you needed to do to make sure the show continued on with David Holliday.
Aggravated assault for hire is what you were basically admitting to. Being privy to.
That's Dave throwing the I love you signal. JC Farina, WWAB 2021. Yes. Guys, 2021. Joel, thank you for that. Howard Collado, we will be seeing you soon for the games that we play. Howard Collado, you are a game that we play. So you have any final words you'd like to tell to our viewers? Anything?
Yeah, Avi Klein. It's worse.
Okay, so Howard Collado will be joining us a little bit later, guys and gals. He has some tech issues, as you can see. Right now, we are going to get serious. We're going to talk about a serious topic. And I do want to bring in a guest who's in the green room right now. This guest, talk about quality over quantity, the quality of time I've spent speaking with her. Man, I got to tell you, a strong, courageous woman who lost her husband a few months back. And her husband was supposed to be part of this team, part of the Wrestling with Anything But podcast. I've never witnessed anybody as not only heartbroken, but if this makes any sense, Mike Drose, heartbroken, but also determined and strong all at the same time. Her love for her husband is a beautiful thing to watch, whether it's a post that the fans and viewers have seen, whether it's a conversation I've had with her. Her love is so strong for her husband. I got to tell you right off the bat, that inspired me. And I want to welcome her to Road to Recovery. We've seen her on Face Value with Bill DeMott and myself. I want to bring her in again. Hopefully we'll be doing some work together as well in the new year. Kim, how are you tonight?
Hi, Avi. Hi, Mike. I'm good.
Hi, Kim. How are you?
I'm good.
Thanks for being on the show. Let me just say something before we get started. I've got to tell you, I only had the opportunity to meet Joe within the last few months doing appearances and stuff like that and conventions. And he was so gracious and nice to me. I idolized those guys when I was growing up and coming up through the business early on in my the early years when I was training. If you ever watched me wrestle, a large percentage of what I did was the Road Warriors. And to have the opportunity to meet him was a thrill in and of itself. But then for him to be such a quality human being and such a nice guy to me and really talk to me about things and about the business when he didn't have to, I will always cherish that. I will always truly cherish that. He was a truly great man.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Sure. Absolutely. And, when we conversed the first time, Kim, as I mentioned earlier, I was floored by your strength, but I was also floored by your story. And it's so honest. Not to say that when people go through a loss, there isn't honesty, but there's a moment of denial. And I know you went through that, but you also had to pick yourself up and deal with logistics, deal with, I guess, a lot of things that people don't really think about when they lose somebody so suddenly, right?
That's absolutely true. And there's a lot of times that when, even to this day, that you hear how strong you are, and then inside you're really going, I am not that strong, because you don't feel strong. Every day that you wake up, you're grateful that you woke up. You're grateful that you just got through that previous day. And that's like a huge obstacle. So you feel strong in that sense. But then just getting through that new day is like you feel almost defeated at the beginning. But then at the end of the day, you feel like, oh my God, I just made it through this whole day. So then you feel strong at the end of the day. And so it's kind of like a catch-22, because like in the morning time, you feel completely weak and defeated almost, because you have to get through that day. But then at the end
I think that sums it up. Yeah, that sums up recovery very well in terms of whatever you're recovering from. But that's generally how it works. Sometimes it's one day at a time, and you wake up at the beginning looking at the challenge of the day as almost maybe a daunting task. And then by the end of the day, you've made it. You've conquered another day, and you're moving forward, day by day, slowly but surely. So yeah, that is definitely textbook recovery. That's how you make it through life, especially early on in the beginning. So I commend you for that.
Thank you. And I don't think I've ever gone through anything like this in the least. And I've never suffered from depression. I've never suffered from PTSD or anything like that, where you had to literally take it. Some days it's hour by hour. Some days it's like you've had a good day and you look back and you go, oh my God, I actually had a good day. Wow, where did this come from? And there's fewer of those than there are the bad days. But when you do, it's like, oh my gosh, I can write this one down in my journal. I actually had a good day.
But what made it really hit home was the fact that you guys weren't just married. And I want the viewers to know this. You lost your best friend, essentially, as well.
Absolutely. And what's even hard, this is another kind of catch-22, because it's like you spend so much time, and a lot of married people, I was one of them in the beginning. You like to have your separation, you like to have your job, you go to work because you don't want to spend too much time together, because you can definitely get on each other's nerves. You got to have that break where you miss each other and you come home and you're not going to strangle each other. We were in that boat too. And I was like, oh God, when are you going to go back on an appearance? Like, we got to be able to miss each other and come back home, and he knew. He would even tell me, I know it's time for me to go. And yeah, it is. And then it got to a few years ago when we talked. He was, like I said, I told him everything, my medical conditions. I'm a breast cancer survivor. And then back in 2015, I got a really bad staph infection in my spine, and it almost took me down. And I was hospitalized for 62 days, and Joe never left the hospital. He was there by my side nonstop. Getting in fights with doctors. I know you can't believe that with Joe, but he was an advocate for everything. And I mean, that one thing my mom said, that's how you can tell that that's your man. That's a real man, where they don't leave your side. They advocate for you. It didn't matter if he was sleeping in a chair. It didn't matter if he didn't sleep at all. He was right there. And I think that's the scary thing now is I told him everything. It didn't matter. I had to kind of let my walls come down, because I was always very guarded, when I first met Joe. And he conquered that, and being able to tell him and share with him everything, and then have him see me at my most vulnerable state, and have him there being able to do that for me. And then vice versa, like later on in life, like when he was battling his health conditions. I mean, I went to every doctor's appointment with him, and I kind of had a battle between being wife/mother figure because I wanted to take care of him. I wanted to make sure he was taking care of himself. And he would let me know, like, okay, I got this. But sometimes he wouldn't have that, because he liked to just keep going and going and going. And sometimes you had to jerk the chain back a little bit. And he did. I mean, he wanted to do for everyone else except himself. And that was a battle.
That stubborn, old-fashioned kind of mentality. I understand that, yeah. Paul Roma's joining in as well. Animal's a nice guy. I enjoyed working and traveling with him. God bless Joe, you and your family, from Paul Roma.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
And that's so great to hear, though, because that's everyone that I've talked to, that's the same thing that you hear about Joe, is that how real he was, what a nice guy he was. He'd give you the shirt off his back. He'd be willing to help you in any way, shape, or form. And that gives me such pride. I mean, I was so proud. And I used to take pictures of him from the side, like when I'd be watching him, like we go to WrestleCade or, different things. I just watch him, like when he was talking different. And he's like, were you over there taking pictures? And I was like, yeah, because you were in your element, and I was just so proud of you. And I just love to watch him, be able to do that. And sure. He never looked back at different things. Then I would show him, like, look, this is, he was like, oh my gosh, look, I didn't know I did that. I didn't know, oh, that's my favorite picture. And I was able to capture some of his moments too, that he never had anyone really do, where he could look back and he was happy, with that. That's just like his last birthday. We were able to celebrate 10 days before he passed. And we were able to get, not only I was going for 60 videos, but we were able to get 70 videos together that told him how much people really cared about him and loved him. And that meant the world to him. I mean, he'd rather have that than materialistic things, because he always told me I went overboard with that.
And he was, and man, was he like during different parts. And guys, I'm going to say this too. I want people to always just remember, be honest. we're all the same human, regardless of our profession. We're all one and the same. Was Joe my best friend? No, Joe was not my best friend. But Joe was the kind of guy that made you feel like you could be. Because every conversation I had with Joe meant something to me. And I always picked up some pearls of wisdom. The last time I saw Joe was at StarCast when Ray Lloyd and I were doing our live podcast in Vegas. And, man, he caught me by and he was like, hey, are you going somewhere? Are you leaving? I'm like, no. He goes, I was like, there's too much wrestling talk. He's like, man, don't worry about it. I feel the same way. So did some of the guys. And we were just talking about history and life and movies and everything else. And he was so opinionated, but also so respectful, but so intelligent. You can have a conversation with Joe about anything across the board. I also want to let people know that, again, Joe was supposed to be part of this family. And I remember the conversation I had with him. We were kind of like fleshing out the theme of the show and what was going to be about. And he was getting excited. Kim, I don't want to bring it back to that day. I know we've done that. And certainly Kim and I are talking about doing something else in 2021. So without delving into that, I want to get into you for a second. What was it about Joe? I know a lot of the viewers, we have a new audience here that maybe don't watch Face Value. What was it about Joe that spoke to you, I guess, as a human being when you guys were maybe initially not someone that you were interested in, I would venture to say? Right.
I actually knew Joe many years before I ran back into him back in 2012, right, or 2011. I knew him through Mike, and I was better friends with Mike. And my best friend, Mike McGurk, at the time, we ran around together, and I was always friends with Sherry Martel and Marlena. Marlena was one of the photographers for WWE, and we had a friend, Donna, from Houston, and it was all of a girl clique back then. And we knew, it was a different mentality back then. Back in the 80s and the 90s, it was totally different than what it is now. And Joe was not a rude guy, but he was a business guy, and he didn't have any time for any socializing or whatever. So I used to ask him, like, what crawled up your partner's butt and died? Like, he is just like, I don't know, like, what his problem is. And he was another good friend of mine. And I used to go out there, and even sometimes, things would get hectic, and dog, Matilda, they'd be like, I'd go outside and play with the dog sometimes while I was waiting on McGurk and them. And he'd come out there and just be like, hey, how you doing? And just like walk on. I was like, God, he never says anything. He's just rude. And so then later on, when we ran into each other, it was like, I don't know if it was just the timing and, things in people's lives are different. I was in a different kind of marriage, just like he was before. Things happen. I believe everything happens for a reason. You go through bad situations to get you to where you are now. And I think that happened for both of us. And when I ran into him, I was actually with Mike McGurk that day, and ran into him, and I was like, is that him? Like, is that legit him? Because he was super talkative, super nice, like you said, talking about everyday things. And I mean, it was just something that struck us. Then we were over there with a big group of people, and we talked nonstop. In fact, we were supposed to go to the WrestleMania show. Well, Mike McGurk and I didn't make the WrestleMania show. We ended up staying at the Post Hotel with all the guys over there, and we stayed out on South Beach. She was going through something with her husband that had just passed away, and we really didn't care about going to the show.
Sure.
Well, Joe stayed with us, and he was like, I'm just going to stay here and hang out with you guys. And we talked for hours and hours, and from that day forward, there was not another day that I didn't talk about or anything to him. I
remember you said that too. From that day on, every day you guys had a conversation. Angie Bigman, thank you for joining us. Eric John, Kyle Wegner, Hector, thank you. Another thing, I want to throw this over to Mike also. What a lot of people don't realize regarding recovery is that sometimes maybe what propels you forward is the fact that you have to exist, right? You have to wake up. You have to keep moving regardless of whether or not you think you can. Was that almost in a way, Mike? I know you know a lot about recovery, and I'm going to also ask him this question because you're going through this now. Is that almost beneficial because you don't have time maybe to kind of address what took place? Not to mourn. I know you have time to do that. But because there's so many duties and responsibilities afterwards, does that excel the healing process a bit?
I think a lot of people go through it in different ways. And I think sometimes in the beginning, just in the trying to figure it out process, you're kind of on autopilot before you really have time to start bearing